Hey friends, today we're going to be talking about anxiety, and specifically, what do you think is the most anxious type on the Enneagram? You know, we have so many stereotypes that we lean towards when we think about the term of anxiety and all the stereotypes and that we put on each individual type. Well, we're about to blow your mind because we're going to talk about anxiety, but how it shows up for each Enneagram type. And before we get there, in order for us to have a better understanding, a more healthy relationship with anxiety, we're going to have to define it. And so we're thankful that you've joined us today. We're going to dive in deep on what is anxiety in this episode. Then we're going to apply it to each Enneagram type. And then we're going to come back with a third episode in the series to talk through how each type can handle their own anxiety when it shows up. Well, welcome to Your Enneagram Coach, the podcast. I am Jeff McCord, CEO and co-founder, where we've helped millions of people around the globe to help discover, explore, and become the person that they've always longed to be. I'm here today with our Director of Coaching, Adam Breckenridge. Adam, always great to be with you.
Always great to be with you. How about
now,
2 6s? Talking about anxiety.
That's what, see, now you say that, but that's one of the stereotypes is that 6s might be the most anxious on the Enneagram. And I would beg to differ.
Yeah.
But I will say, too, that it is kind of ironic.
It is.
But why shouldn't we, though? Because if we were the most anxious, then that means that we've handled the most anxiety.
That's right. That's right. We're the experts on anxiety.
Welcome to the hood of anxiety.
That is the name of our spinoff podcast that Jeff and I are starting.
Welcome to the. Sometimes when Beth's a 9, and so she has a line that comes down to 6. And and I did say that correctly. It comes down to 6. Like she's got a when she's not doing well, she gets pretty anxious and spun out. But I sometimes joke with her like, "Hey Beth, you can't handle living down here. You need to get out of my neighborhood."
Yeah, that's right. Let me worry for the both of us.
Dude, oh man.
Yeah.
Think about that. When you think about Enneagram couple types, which one of you is carrying the anxiety of the relationship? That's a big deal.
Yeah.
Oh, we've got a lot of thoughts about anxiety, everybody. A lot of thoughts. Well, like I said before, for these next few episodes, we're going to be talking about what is anxiety. We're going to show you how it shows up for each Enneagram type. And then we're going to talk about what are ways to handle. What are ways to have a better relationship to the anxiety that we may or may not have named yet? So Adam's been doing some excellent research on this topic, and I have found him to be tremendously helpful in being able to name what's been going on in my own life. And so, Adam, why don't you start us off and just give us a great definition. I almost say a clear definition. Anxiety is sometimes it can be very expansive and ambiguous. At other times, you maybe gain some clarity on it. But why don't you give us a definition, kind of a working definition for what anxiety is and how it shows up?
Yeah. I'll give my best shot. So I think we'll start by naming that anxiety is not just a 6 thing. We joke about that, but anxiety really is a common human phenomenon. It's a common human emotional experience, and it can manifest in a lot of different ways. It can manifest mentally, constant worry, worst case scenario thinking, restless thoughts. It shows up in physiological responses, like in our emotions, tension in the body, increased blood pressure, racing heart, sweating, inability to relax, brain fog, muscle tension, digestive issues, bad sleep. So it's this common emotional experience that shows up in different ways, but we're all familiar with it.
Well, Adam, whenever I hear you talk about that, what I think of whenever I hear those things is my 6-iness shows up more strongly when I am anxious.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's true for each Enneagram type, is that the expression of our type, our way of relating to the world, when it's the strongest is when anxiety is pushing. Anxiety is when something's not right in the world.
That's right. Yeah.
And I have a pattern, both physiologically and psychologically as to how I default to try to address what's wrong in the world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
it shows up differently for all of us. But
Yeah.
just because you move towards trying to be stronger,
Uh-huh.
less less connected with the world, maybe more independent,
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't mean that you're not any less anxious.
That's
That
right.
just may be the
Yeah.
style that you uh, respond to whenever you are getting
That's right.
anxious.
That's right. And
I
we're going
thought I
to
was an 8 for 5 years.
Uh-huh.
Let's just get real here. I thought I was an 8 for 5 years until I sat down with a therapist he introduced one of my mentors to the Enneagram. So he'd been saying for a while. This is back in 2001. And we sat down with him. This was now in 2011. And he said, Jeff, looking at your story, I think you're a 6, not an 8.
Mm.
I
Mm.
was livid. I did not touch the Enneagram for a year after that. I was so upset
You didn't
because
want
I
to hear that.
didn't want to admit that I was an anxious man.
Yeah. 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 Well, as we're
What's
going
up?
to
I mean,
see, I
you've
mean,
studied anxiety a lot.
mm-hmm.
Now,
Mm-hmm.
what was it that led you to want to study anxiety?
Well, I too had a therapist encourage me and lead me on a journey of building a relationship with my own anxiety. My own anxiety was not just something that needed to be managed, and sometimes especially if it's chronic anxiety or an anxiety disorder that really overwhelms and interferes with our ability to function in everyday life. Like there's certain management strategies that can be life saving and life changing, but you also have to build a relationship with the anxiety. So for me, it was a therapist guiding me on a journey of connecting with my own anxiety, and then started doing that in the relational dance with my wife, of like helping her build a relationship with the part of me that's anxious, but then help I myself trying to build a relationship with the part of her that's anxious. And the more I kind of traveled down that path, the more I realized that every type is carrying anxiety, and it just shows up differently. And we're going to get into this in the next couple of episodes, but for my type 1 friends, there's a certain anxiety driving the perfectionism, and it's an interesting dance. It's an interesting kind of vicious cycle of there's an anxiety pushing perfectionism. I mean, we call them core fears, Jeff, but
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
anxiety is just fear impaired. I mean, it's just the
yeah,
word, take that fear to its impaired place, and it's a core anxiety that every type has.
yes,
And so the more imperfection the one encounters, the more anxious they become, and the more they double down on trying to perfect. And that gets into a cycle. And you could walk the wheel and do that with every type. That there's an
yeah,
anxiety, even as you were talking about with the 8, the bravado and the strength of an 8. Yes, it's a gift, and it can also be an attempt at getting bigger than the anxiety that's inside of you.
yes.
Um,
That's right.
it's a strategy. So but it was, to answer your question, it was my own exploration of my anxiety that kind of thrust me into this world, and
Yeah.
doing this kind of work for the last probably 10 years. Um, but man, we're seeing this really play out in culture, and everybody's writing about this. Everybody's talking about this. You know what really exaggerated this is COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Um, COVID really threw, gas on the proverbial fire of anxiety, both situational anxiety, which is around work and bills and parenting and conflict in life and relationships, and chronic anxiety. And we're currently living in a moment that's marked by tons of, this is election moment, as we're recording this. And so there's financial worries, there's political unrest, there's economic uncertainty. Everybody's kind of feeling the tension. Social media exaggerates this. And so we're seeing the impact that this has on people reporting anxiety. And I think it might have been you that sent me an article that said, there are over 40 million adults in the United States that are now diagnosed with anxiety disorders. That's over 19% of the adult population. And then there was another survey, this is the one you sent me, that discovered that 41% of American adults are currently experiencing peak stress levels in their life. And so I think everybody's kind of stressed out right now, Jeff. Would you agree?
Everybody's amped. Everybody is amped. And I would say this. I experience this on multiple levels, but I certainly experience it because in my relationships with people, whether professionally or personally, because I notice that people are quickly will say stuff like "I'm out," or they just stop engaging. It could be a simple request that maybe a friend would ordinarily immediately respond to, but then now you start to notice, well, it's taken them a half day or a full day to get back to a simple text message.
Yeah.
We experience this professionally whenever we
Yep.
send out emails to people and
Yep.
don't hear back from them. We're so overwhelmed. It's almost like we're just starting to shut down and dissociate.
That's right. Yeah.
It's been interesting, like people buying books right now. People are buying fantasy books, and why? They're trying to get out of the angst,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
100% understandable.
Yeah.
How many of us ever grew up with a parent who helped us to organize our emotions and our bodies whenever we felt overwhelmed and anxious? Oftentimes it was more like we were shamed by their responses.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, put yourself together, get yourself together, or minimizing. This is not that big of
Not
a
that
deal.
big a
Stop
deal.
overacting.
Yeah. Yeah. Nothing to worry about. Oh man, you can slap a Bible verse on it, right? Be anxious about
Adam, careful
nothing.
now.
Don't be anxious about anything, Jeff.
Adam.
Don't be anxious about anything. I mean, what is there to worry about?
Yeah,
Right?
sure. Tell us more about this. Do not fear, which is the command. Do not
Yeah.
fear.
You know what we call
Right?
that, by the way? And maybe we're drifting off the rails here, but we call that spiritual pharmacology, where it's, oh, you're anxious? Take a couple Bible verses and call me
Yeah.
tomorrow. This will fix your problem. And of course,
Adam, why is it? I mean, I know we're being provocative, and if
uh-huh.
Beth were here, she'd probably say, "Okay, boys, that's
She'd say,
enough."
all right, guys, that's enough.
But why do you think it is that doesn't work? And that maybe that's not even how the Bible intended those verses to be.
Well, that's the answer, is that it's actually not, because it's not a relational approach. The whole thing when the scriptures say "do not be afraid" is there's always a. It's not just "don't be afraid" like it's a black and white moral command. If you're afraid, it's a sin. It actually never even
Get
says.
your stuff together.
No, yeah, it's do not. You don't have to be afraid because I'm here. It's always it's an invitation to relationship of bring your fear to me, God says, and the reason you don't have to be afraid is because I'm not going to abandon you. I'll be with you. And so it's not a, hey, you're wrong if you're afraid. It's your fear is a window into the heart of God, and it's an invitation to be with God and connect with God in your fear. And that's what Jesus is doing when he's teaching on the hillside. He's like, you guys don't have to be anxious. I'm with you, and I love you, and I'm for you. But he's certainly not shaming us for anxiety. It's a relational approach. But hey, can I tell you this? And then we can shift gears. If you want to shift
Sure.
gears, we can. The reason why we do that, though, to ourselves and to other people, the reason why we say, "Oh, hey, just don't be afraid." The Bible says, "Don't worry." The person that does that because they're anxious. They're having feelings about the other person's feelings. So your anxiety is actually making me anxious. So I need to shut
Mhm.
you down. So here's a Bible verse that's going to shut you down, put you in your place, help you, now it's on you and I don't have to carry it. So anytime we go into fix it mode, it's because the person fixing is anxious, whether they
Yeah.
realize it or not, and they're trying to get out of their own feelings. And so all that does, Jeff, is bring us back to everybody's anxious.
Yeah. Everybody is. And it's
Everybody's anxious.
profoundly isolating.
Yeah.
I have found in my
Yeah.
own life, in light of the anxiety I'm feeling and projecting onto others, and in companionship with the anxiety I think others are feeling, I just find in politically, I just feel like our neighborhood is volatile. It's just ripe with this tension of politics.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel safe having or being able to express my own thoughts and feelings about things.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know who I'm dealing with.
That's right.
And
right.
and I've developed this mindset, like I don't trust anyone to share what I'm really thinking or experiencing when things are happening in our culture.
Yep.
I've got thoughts, I have fears, I have um, reasons why I believe certain things, but to be able to actually share those out loud just seems like such a risk.
Yeah. 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 Well,
What's interesting? Go ahead,
go
Adam.
ahead. Well, I was actually about to ask you a question. Why don't you finish that thought?
Well, what's been interesting since, so for many of you, you may already know, but last October, I'm coming up on 1 year, I had bypass surgery, multiple bypass. I think they replaced them all. But since then, I started walking. They had given me, I don't know, a prescription, I guess, but I needed to be able to walk 1 mile each day within 1 month after my surgery.
Wow.
And that put the goal orientation part of my heart, the athletic part of my heart into action. And so, but now I walk, most days I walk about 4 miles each day. And I will say, Adam, that the reason why I have increased that to that much walking, like I walked out of my first New Balance shoes. Like I'd walked so much, the soles were coming off, and there was the aggregate on the sidewalks that I watched were literally tearing up the soles. I'd walked so much in those shoes. It's because I sense that my anxiety decreases. It has probably been the number one thing that I've ever
Mm.
done to address my anxiety is to walk. And the reason why I'm up to 4 miles most days, it's because there's that much anxiety that I'm carrying.
Uh-huh. Yeah. 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 Can you say more about that? That's what I was going to ask. Is since we're already talking about the anxiety that you're carrying, and I'm happy to share as well. But I'm just curious, as a six, how would you describe your relationship to anxiety, especially during these anxious times?
My most acute times, and I was just listening to a podcast about this last night, as a matter of fact, um, is before I go to bed.
Mm.
And what this particular segment of the podcast was discussing was, why do we have these emotional responses that show up for us when we finally slow down? Now,
Mm.
for many of us, we've developed patterns where we're just doom scrolling, I think they call it, where we're going to disassociate in hopes that we'll just be able to fall asleep. Some people might choose alcohol. Some people might choose a little bit of food or something that's going to help them to fall asleep, maybe medications, right? And because it's almost like the anxiety just shows up and says, you can't get away from me.
Mm.
And for me, it's just racing thoughts. I wake up at times thinking about, I'm not even thinking reasonably. This morning, I woke up thinking about something that didn't even exist, but I was trying to figure it out.
Oh, wow.
So I'm halfway dreaming and halfway awake trying to figure something out. I carry the anxiety in my body. It's right there in the pit of my stomach.
Mm-hmm.
It shows up I just go over and over and over the same thing, trying to solve the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And it's particularly burdensome. And what walking has done, like I literally have the image of, with each step, I'm transferring the anxiety into the sidewalk, just
Mm.
trying to let my body release it.
Mm.
Um, and even the rhythms that come with walking.
Mm.
There are lines in the sidewalks. We live in a fairly new neighborhood, and so the sidewalks are still put together and not cracking and stuff. But there, the little lines to prevent cracking the side. It's almost rhythmic, as it's the line, the line, the line, the line, which is kind of the origin story of EMDR, which is a
That's what I was,
therapeutic
yep.
practice.
Yep.
And those kinds of things help things to calm down for me. And I notice on days that I don't walk, I just start the day amped up
Mm-hmm.
and racing and trying to solve every problem rather than the fundamental problems. How about you? How does it show up in your life?
Yeah, it's funny that you say right before bed. For me, it's often first thing in the morning. Um, I I think that's when I mostly notice anxiety. I think when you wake up, you're you're kind of defenseless. You're not at your strongest. You're pretty vulnerable, and there's a whole day in front of you, and there's a big to-do list on that, for that day. And there's things from the past day's to-do list that you didn't complete. And immediately there's kids that need me and need something from me, and everybody needs something from me. And I think that's the moment, which is why, what I've tried to do to counter, not push away, not push away my anxiety, but as we're going to talk about in a minute, welcome it and counter it with kindness, is I try to start my day with some silence and solitude, just some time alone to myself. Kind of like you're talking about going for a walk. I'm talking about sitting down and just breathing, not even jumping straight into a book or scripture, or just because that can be a distraction from my anxiety. I need to start my day. If I'm at my best, I'm starting my day just breathing alone for, somewhere between 5 to 20 minutes, just by myself alone. Now, there's a difference between the ideal and the real. In real life, that doesn't happen every day. There are a lot of times we wake up just in enough time to get everybody fed for breakfast and get out the door to get the kids to school. Then I got to get back and jump into my first meeting of the day. But that's where I notice it show up. I notice it show up in parenting a lot. I mean, you talk about, if anxiety has something to do with control, you're pretty out of control of these other human beings that you're responsible for. You can't keep them breathing. You can't make them make wise choices. You can't,
Adam, in my recovery meeting, we have a specific way that we phrase the serenity prayer. And it's, the typical serenity prayer is, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. But in our program, it's called ACA. And the it's much more disturbing.
Go for it.
It gets me every time I say it, but it's, God, grant me the serenity to accept the people I cannot change, the courage to change the one I can, and the wisdom to know that one is me.
Ooh.
See, that's where it lands, right at the end. Like, the wisdom to know that one is me. Like, I'm the only one I can change. Can't change anybody else.
That's right.
How much of our anxiety is in that between us?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
You mentioned something earlier about reading scripture. It makes me think, first thing in the morning, if you're getting up to try and solve the problems of the day.
Oh, that's a recipe for anxiety.
You're literally activating your nervous system in a way as to be more anxious.
Yep.
But what you were saying is that, and this is what I've experienced for myself, my walking is an act of kindness towards myself.
That's right.
It is attuning to myself, being in silence and solitude. So for me, I've stopped listening to books on my walks, because books rev my mind up and rev the dreams and desires, aspirations. And I love content, love reading.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But it activates.
Yeah.
And then, Dan Allender once, I said, what should you do? If you don't have the money to go to a counselor, what should you do when you're activated? Go on long, slow walks.
Yep. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Slow down and take care of it. Show up in loving kindness towards yourself.
Yeah. 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 It's a game changer. If you try to match your anxiety with resolutions, if you see your anxiety as, your anxiety is not the problem. It's usually the solution. It's usually a part of you that's working really hard to try to fix something for you, help you with something. And that's where we're going to land this conversation.
Right. Well, keep going with that, Adam, because you've heard us use the phrase a couple of times, having a relationship with anxiety.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
For most of us, we're trying to just kick it out and beat it with a stick and try to get it out of our house like a a pest in our home.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but it,
How's that working for you? Yeah. 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 Well, let's talk about that. I think, but before we end this conversation, let's talk about the role that anxiety is trying to play for us. The last thing we want to do, and I hope to the listener that you really lean in here. The last thing we want to do is shame anyone's anxiety. The reality is anxiety is trying to help us. Anxiety at its core is a survival mechanism designed to protect us. It's like the mind's way of alerting us to potential danger, perceived threats. It pushes us to take action to stay safe. In this sense, anxiety has good intentions. It's trying to keep us aware and prepared, whether that's helping us plan for future challenges or avoid risks, meet deadlines. It's a signal that something needs our attention, and it often feels overwhelming. It feels very uncomfortable, but still, its role is to ensure that we are vigilant, we are equipped to respond to situations that might compromise or hurt our well-being or the well-being of people we love. And so, when properly understood, anxiety can be, let me say it this way, when properly understood and properly led,
mhm.
related to in a healthy way, anxiety can be a really helpful part of us that motivates us to make decisions that support our growth and safety. And
Now,
Jeff,
I
you
will
and I
say
love,
this, Adam.
yeah,
The you're hinting at something here, but you didn't come out and clearly say it. And I want to follow up with just a
yeah,
clarifying question
yeah.
here. Are you saying that God made us in such a way as to experience anxiety?
Well, it's certainly baked into the human experience. I mean, there's no way to navigate life in a world that's in a world that's unsafe, and not feel anxious. And
That's
if
right.
if properly understood, anxiety is not the thing that's wrong with you that you need to fix or shame or get better in order for you to feel okay with yourself or for God or whoever to feel okay with you. Anxiety is not the thing about you that's broken that needs to be fixed. It's the very thing about you that makes you human, and it's an invitation to love, really. I mean, it's an invitation to experience God's mercy and grace and
Right.
kindness toward you. The thing that keeps us from experiencing God's kindness to us in anxiety is usually our lack of kindness toward ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Closes the door to his kindness.
Yeah.
And and so that's the key thing is, can you see your anxiety through the eyes of love as a part of you that's trying to help you? If you see it as a pest in your house that you need to push out the door or beat it with a stick, as you were saying earlier, it, it's only going to dig in its heels. It's only
Yeah.
going to get more anxious and more out of control. Um,
Now, earlier, I think you were about to mention, but we've talked recently, and you and I have talked personally, both on the podcast and in just everyday conversation, but about the movie Inside Out too,
oh yeah, so good.
because its main uh, what I want to conflict is how does a person relate to their sense of anxiety?
Hmm.
But I mean, you've always done such an excellent job of explaining this and talking it through. But why don't you
Yeah.
tell us about the role of anxiety in Riley's life?
Yeah, so in Inside Out 2, Riley's now in middle school, and she's anxious. There's a if you haven't seen the film, the supporting cast is Riley's emotions, which are personified. And in the second film, as I mentioned, anxiety is introduced as the new emotion that reflects her experience of moving into adolescence. And what you see in the movie is how anxiety steps in over and over to protect Riley by warning her of potential dangers and uncertainties. And she's facing all kinds of new challenges like puberty and social pressures and going to a new school with new friends, being, academic expectations and, all her raging hormones. And she's going through all this change, and anxiety steps in over and over and over to protect her. However, as you and I both know, Jeff, while anxiety's intentions are to keep her safe, it can also overwhelm her. It can be overwhelming for her. And there's a really
Yeah.
powerful scene you remember the scene late in the movie where anxiety is totally spun out
Yeah.
and running around the control board in Riley's mind, and I mean literally spinning around and around, and Riley's having a panic attack. You can see what's going on inside of her where anxiety is spun out, and then you can see what's going on outside of her, and she's having this panic attack. And
And it is interesting too, like all the it is a movie where these emotions are personified, but each of the other emotions have feelings about anxiety.
that's right. Yeah,
So
that's right.
it's not just Riley's experience, but it's the other parts of us that have a certain relationship and experience around anxiety. It
Mm-hmm.
just has this kind of global impact upon, my friends have described it as like people on an inner tube in the water. Like everybody's got a relationship to one another in order for the inner tube to stay balanced. And
Yeah,
anxiety has its role. And if it's over functioning, it causes all kinds of panic elsewhere.
yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, and joy, the character, the emotion joy inside Riley, played by Amy Poehler, anxiety, played by Maya Hawke. They're the main two that are kind of at each other. You know, in the first film, it was joy and sadness, and they learned at the end of the film, spoiler alert, that the only way for Riley to flourish is if they are integrated and they befriend one another, and they actually have to have each other to exist. You can't have one without the other. And in this film, it's joy and anxiety who are trying to. They're on their own. There's a lot of tension between them, and they're on this journey of befriending each other. And what happens in that scene where Riley's totally spun out, or anxiety is totally spun out, joy moves toward anxiety. You see it happening inside Riley's mind, and joy feels compassion for anxiety. And you
Mm-hmm.
learn that that's the key. I mean, if you can look at the part of you that's anxious with compassion, and what happens is joy guides anxiety to let Riley go, and then the panic stops. And when anxiety finally steps back, she looks at joy, bereft, and she says, this is a direct quote, "I was just trying to protect her."
Mm.
And I'll be honest with you, Jeff. I mean, I get emotional now. When I was in the
Lost it.
theater, I lost it during that scene. I lost it.
Mm-hmm.
I think I felt so much compassion for myself
Yeah.
and the parts of me that carry anxiety that are trying to protect me. But what you realize, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, is you realize in that moment, all along, anxiety was not the antagonist in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Anxiety was just trying to help. And
Well, sorry, I might have looked a little distracted in that moment, but our family's coming over for dinner tonight, and one of my granddogs just came up to say hi to me in the studio. Uh, Came in, got a few scratches, and now she left.
that's all you're good for. Just a few
Just to
scratches.
soothe her anxious heart.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
She was ready to come see Papa, and so yeah, kind of funny.
That's awesome.
But yeah, you are right, and I was just trying to protect her. I,
Yeah.
I mean, but think about the levels or story of your anxiety. My anxiety was, it's carrying the burden of having a mom who was ill,
Mm.
and facing a world where I didn't have direction. At times, I didn't have guidance. And anxiety was the energy that moved me to try to figure things out. They
Hmm.
say for sixes, they don't describe themselves as smart or intelligent, but street smart.
Mm.
And there's a certain sense where I'm always observing the world, trying to absorb whatever I can because I don't feel like I'm enough to be in the world. I don't know
Yes.
enough.
Yeah.
There's what security do I need?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
or where can I find security?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and so our that part of our heart that carries anxiety it's a gift that needs to be affirmed. And that was part of what was happening is anxiety had good plans at times.
Hmm.
And other times was over functioning in life and actually getting in the way and actually creating more harm for Riley
Yeah.
and more harm for us. Because when you sustain that much high levels of anxiety for longer periods of time, the body doesn't thrive under that kind of pressure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
so and that's one of the ways that the Enneagram actually becomes very helpful, is that we don't have to talk about anxiety in generalized terms, but we get to talk about it and how it shows up very specifically. And so in our next episode, we're actually going to walk through each of the 9 types and talk about how each of the 9 types, how anxiety shows up in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of like the trailhead of a hiking trail, it's going to be the path that when you experience it, your inclination is to want to indulge it. But it's actually a path to be curious about and to walk through rather than away from.
Yes.
It's like that old children's book, Going on a Bear Hunt.
Oh,
Gotta catch a
yeah.
big one. Oh, no grass. Tall, wavy grass. Can't go
Can't
over
go
it,
around
can't
it.
go under it.
Can't go over it.
You've got to go through it.
Got to.
And your anxiety has something to teach you about the world.
Yeah.
And it actually can lead you to profound intimacy with others when you start to embrace, and intimacy with God, when you start to embrace the role anxiety is playing in your life.
That's right.
It's not something that you have to be afraid of.
Yeah.
But the more that I attune and look towards my anxiety, the more that it feels seen, it feels heard, feels understood, and the better parts of myself, the more grounded parts of myself, actually can provide the kind of guidance and protection that I need.
Mm.
And each day that I walk, that's what's happening. That anxious part of my heart is seeing, oh, adult Jeff's going to take care of us today.
Mm-hmm.
At least for the morning walk. We'll see what happens after that.
Yeah. We'll see where we are around lunch, but right now,
It's so true.
yeah, it's very true.
It's so true.
Well, thanks, Jeff, for unpacking that for us. And I'm really excited about these next couple episodes. That we're going to talk about the role, as you said, anxiety is playing and how it shows up for each Enneagram type. And then 2 episodes from now, we're going to talk about practices of self-leadership, where when you see anxiety, you can not come at it with a broomstick or whatever weapon of choice, but you can actually have some healthy responses and what we call healthy self-leadership, and ways that you can navigate your anxiety when it shows up. So yeah, thank you for joining us for this discussion about anxiety and the Enneagram. If you found this helpful, be sure to like and subscribe and share this episode with a friend. And, don't forget to ask us your questions. You can reach out to us in the comments or email us at info@yourenneagramcoach.com. And we'll hope you'll join us for the next couple episodes as we continue this conversation. Like I said, in our next episode, Jeff and I are going to talk about how each Enneagram type experiences anxiety, and we can't wait to see you in that episode. Thanks for joining us. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.